So folks, as you heard, the meeting's being recorded. My name is Bill Ahern. I'm the Director of Public Works. Tonight we have representatives from V-Trans. We have our committee chair, Giuliano Ceccanelli, and I'm going to turn this over to him. I did need to just make certain that you recognize it's recorded and it'll be available for folks later to view. Okay. We'll see it. That might pick you up. It's picking you up, I think. So what Rick told me is I'm using.
Aaron, it could be you. Are you not?
Haven't joined the other.
Okay. I'm just looking at the screen, seeing
Anyone need a copy of the agenda? I'll call the meeting to order at 6:30. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just add an item to address committee dialogues and how we make sure the whole Transportation Advisory Committee might be advised of requests and concerns from different members of the community.
I'll add that under 6.4. Under new business. Anything else for adjustments to the agenda? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Do we have someone taking minutes?
That would be you.
According to whom? All right, so all right, I'll do it. Sure.
Take minutes if you need.
Our secretary has resigned from the committee, so I can take the minutes.
I mean, we can establish that now.
Well, that's why I was asking, and so I can backfill it for now, but I just wanted to clarify that we don't have someone whose responsibility it is.
Right, there's approval of minutes, June 16th, 2021. Has everyone had an opportunity to look at the minutes? Then I'd ask for a motion of approval of June 16th, 2021 minutes.
I'll make a motion.
There's a motion, a second, we need a second.
Second.
Any discussion? And I look for approval of the minutes as written.
Aye.
Aye.
Joanne?
I did not receive the minutes. So I'm going.
Okay, the minutes are posted on the committee's website.
Okay, that's, thank you.
Right?
I'll also admit, I didn't realize that I didn't receive the minutes and, but I trust that they're accurate. I didn't realize they were posted on the website and not included in the packet.
Minutes are approved, thank you. Visitors and communications, anyone here for something that is not on the agenda? Okay, old business, the Berlin Street crossing traffic study. That is just a update on what we discussed last month.
So I had, after our meeting last month, the TAC advised that what they were interested in was obtaining better information about the probability of an occurrence where a train passing through the Berlin Street intersection would cause the queue to back into North Main Street and prevent emergency services use of North Main Street. I've written to V-Trans and I've asked for them to examine that, and I've asked for something called a probability impact analysis, where we look at the likelihood of the train being in the intersection and traffic being backed in, because we recognize that the impact, if an ambulance or a fire truck can't get through North Main Street, it's a really significant issue. It's also a really low probability event, and so in terms of deciding whether or not to try to make a public investment to prevent that, it was good to take a look at the actual likelihood of that risk occurring. I haven't heard back from V-Trans. I have received some correspondence that suggests that they would like to go ahead with the project as it is designed. And at this point, the city hasn't accepted that position and has not agreed to sign the finance and maintenance agreement with the project. We have provided the necessary right-of-way commitments to the state, but we're looking for more information on how to protect our citizens from not having emergency services readily go down North Main Street if the train is passing through the Berlin Street intersection.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions for Bill?
What's the one way still in the cards here?
So the TAC has previously discussed making Berlin a one-way street outbound that is going from North Main Street towards Vermont 62. And along with that, it provided an opportunity to create a pedestrian path on one side of the street. That is still entirely a possibility. It's in fact on a list of so-called pop-ups for the city to try. So I need to schedule the installation and do the public announcements that would allow us to make Berlin Street one-way outbound from North Main Street all the way to Smith Street and see how that operates. From the emergency services side, we did consult with the fire department and the police department, and they're satisfied that outbound access for that street is adequate, that they would not typically be returning to an event and require access down Berlin Street towards North Main Street. So that is something that needs to be pursued by DPW to establish that pop-up project and test how a one-way street from North Main Street to Smith would actually operate.
I think one thing that should be considered also is the impact of public transportation. I know that street is used for the bus routes. You turn left at that intersection and then right onto North Main and access Northbury Manor inbound.
Hey, for the purposes of minutes, what's going on now?
Yeah, I was just about to just mention that if you do speak, maybe someone might not be able to see you. Just state your name for the record.
Oh, sure, John Charisakis.
Juliana, you're gonna have to, go ahead.
Can you hear the conversation?
What did you just say?
Hear the conversation.
No. I interrupted it because I didn't understand what was happening. Is a member of the public speaking? Is that?
I'm going to test our microphone. Does it help if I stand up and speak loudly? So can you see me and hear me readily?
Yes, I heard everything up until somebody else talking. So I understand that Bill was talking. I've got the minutes for this. Then suddenly somebody else started talking and I had no idea what was going on. What was, so no one was called on, no one's name came up. I don't know how to write that down, is all I'm saying.
Paraphrase that for you, but I was trying to demonstrate for our attendants here that if we stand up and speak loudly, the camera will come to them. That was the benefit of John Charasakis, who mentioned that GMTA actually has a route that runs contrary to the one-way that we're discussing, and that we should, he recommended that we look at public transit routes before we make any decision on that action. But I do.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm going to note what I keep noting when this comes up, which is that, we've had a number of meetings with the residents of Berlin Street. And as far as I understand, it's been pretty resolved that the one way was not. So I feel like we're jerking around the residents who came in here and gave us a lot of input. And we had decided, oh yeah, one way is not on the table. And every time it comes back, I say, hey, remember how we made a decision about this? And so I just want to point out that not just that it keeps coming back, but it seems to come back out of turn. And so could we not discuss the one way until maybe there's some public communication about that option?
So Michael, I'm actually not understanding your comment, and I want to ask that you help clarify that. To the best of my knowledge, one way has never been decided by the Transportation Advisory Committee to not be completed. I personally came to the TAC and asked that we consider doing a pop-up project to test it. And as I understood it, I had approval from the TAC. And simply put, I have failed to deliver that. So we're not proposing anything different. What we're revisiting is making sure that the statements that have been made previously are continued to be established for the public's consumption. And if I'm wrong, I welcome being corrected.
Yeah, I'm open to being. I'd say let's find the minutes where this came from. I was not on the TAC committee during the Berlin Street meeting, but I attended that meeting, and what I recall was that the issue was, the one-way issue was pretty soundly put to bed. That's what I remember. And so I don't have, a dog in this particular fight, but in terms of process, I just want to make sure that we're not just running in whichever direction, something appears in front of us. So if I'm wrong, certainly I won't stand on the idea that I'm absolutely right.
So in my notes, there was a pop-up listed on Berlin Street. It was in May. So.
But it was a pop-up of a one-way.
No, the pop-up was for Berlin Street. I didn't put in my notes that it was directly for one way.
I want to offer that although the minutes may not have reflected that, that is exactly what was proposed at that time.
Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, I was just looking to see if the minutes were posted from the May meeting, and I know they're pretty scattershot in terms of being posted on the website. So there are no minutes of record on the website for that May meeting to reference.
The city will work to fix that, and thank you for that observation.
Anything else on the Berlin Street crossing traffic study? All right, we will move on to new business, 6.1. It's the V-Trans project, the Corey Street intersection, and just have the presenters introduce themselves for the record.
Yeah, I'm Aaron Guyette, and I'm with VHB, or Consulting Engineering Firm.
Jeff Bacchianchi, I'm also with VHB.
And Patty Coburn with V-Trans.
Can you allow me to share my screen?
I can address that.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, we have a short PowerPoint presentation that we're going to share, and then we'll get into questions and answers toward the end. I would say though, if you have any questions about kind of specific material we're talking about, or the slide we're on, feel free to just speak up. So this is the Barry City, Barry Town, it's Corey Street Improvement Project. This is a Class 1 town highway project, meaning that both Corey Street and South Main Street in this area, Vermont 14, are both Class 1 town highways. The project is mostly within the city of Barry. There's a small portion that's also in Barry Town. So as we mentioned, meeting with you today is Patty from Agency of Transportation, and then myself and Jeff from VHB. Just quickly, reminder about the V-Trans project development process. This is the process that basically every project that's developed by the agency goes through. There's an initial scoping phase, conceptual design, preliminary design, a right-of-way process, and then final design and ultimately construction. So right now we have completed preliminary design and currently in the right-of-way process. Wanted to revisit the purpose and the need for the project. So the purpose, as you can see here, the purpose is of this project is to rebuild Corey Street to match the widened section in Barry Town, to improve the safety and operations at the intersection of Corey Street and South Main Street, which is Vermont 14, and to address drainage deficiencies within the project area. And then the need for the project, really kind of targeting three separate areas: the width of Corey Street, the Corey Street and South Main Street intersection, and then drainage deficiencies. So with the width, Corey Street serves as a vital link in the local roadway network. It provides access from South Main Street to Barry Town, which has both residential and industrial areas further up Corey Street. Barry Town has constructed a deceleration lane for descending trucks. However, that lane ends at the city town line, which is part of the way up the hill. For the intersection, prior to any work on this project, we'll visit this a little bit further in the presentation. But prior to any work on this project, the southern radius of the intersection was insufficient for vehicles and especially for large trucks navigating that turn from South Main Street onto Corey Street. Southbound traffic onto Corey Street. There's enough traffic that's making that left-hand turn as vehicles travel south onto Corey Street that a left turn lane is warranted there. So that's lacking right now. And then cars turning from Corey Street onto South Main Street, they have poor sight distance because of some of the roadway geometry there. And then it's currently a single lane of traffic, which causes cars to queue up during peak periods. And then the drainage side of things, again, prior to any work on the project, a swale along the south side of Corey Street It drained a substantial watershed. It still drains a substantial watershed, and it's prone to flooding during storm events. And then there are other areas of stormwater runoff that just flows onto the street. Not really the best situation. So that's just kind of a review of the purpose and the need and why the project is happening. A very quick overview of the project here. On the left-hand side, make sure my cursor shows up. Yep. So on the left-hand side of the screen is South Main Street. North is up. There's a north arrow on the top right here. And then Corey Street extends from the intersection at South Main Street, past Hale Street, and then up around the corner and then into Berrytown. A couple of things to note here. The project does meet up with the existing deceleration lane that's coming down the hill from Berrytown. I believe it ends in this area. So part of this project is to extend that deceleration lane down to the intersection with Vermont 14. And then as we approach the intersection with Vermont 14, it serves as a left hand and a right hand separate turning lanes so that we have shorter queues along Corey Street. Also along Corey Street are drainage improvements, utility relocations, improved railroad crossing. The intersection becomes a signalized intersection. We talked about the lack of a left turn lane on South Main Street. So there is a left turn lane here shown for cars that are traveling south on Vermont 14 and turning left on Corey Street. We'll get into a little bit more detail in some of the slides that come up. I wanted to go through a few design considerations. So we are looking at a signalized intersection. The traffic volumes there do warrant the use of a signalized intersection. We're looking at improved intersection geometry in the final project. Some of that has already been, a portion of that has already been constructed in the field. We've talked about the South Main Street left turn lane, which would be constructed. We'd end up with an improved typical section along Corey Street. Right now it's very narrow. Pavement ranges from about 22, just over 22 feet to about 25 feet. And we're looking at adding 3-foot shoulders and a sidewalk along the north side of Corey Street. We're looking at reconstructing that railroad crossing with safety improvements there, advanced warning, active warning system, drainage improvements, which will be both treatment of stormwater and conveyance of the stormwater, and then utility relocations along the corridor. So this is a zoomed in view of the Vermont 14 and Corey Street intersection. As we said, we're looking at signalizing this intersection for the 3 legs, both the northbound and southbound on Vermont 14, as well as Corey Street on the east. We're showing the new South Main left turn lane, which is shown a little bit clearer here in the zoomed in version. There will be some pedestrian safety features, clearly identified crosswalks and coordinated with the signal, so signalized phases for pedestrians crossing both Main Street, South Main Street and Corey Street. We've got the separated left turn lanes, left and right turn lanes shown on Corey Street so that cars that are approaching can navigate to one or the other lane. Again, reducing the queues along Corey Street. The improved intersection geometry, it was really this southern part of the intersection that was a very big concern. Previously, it was pretty much just a T intersection and trucks had to navigate into oncoming traffic to make that turn. And then improved operational safety on Cherry Street as part of the intersection improvements and the signalization. Cherry Street in this section would be converted to a one-way in. So vehicles can only enter here and then would exit a short distance further to the south. This is a typical section along Corey Street. This section represents the area between South Main Street and Hale Street. It's got the 3-foot shoulders that we talked about, 2 11-foot travel lanes in the westbound direction, 1 11-foot travel lane in the eastbound direction, and another 3-foot shoulder. Curbs on either side, granite curbs, to help convey the stormwater, and then a sidewalk on the north side of Corey Street. After we go beyond Hale Street, we don't have a sidewalk anymore, and but the typical section of the roadway does continue. Just highlighting the sidewalk improvements here. There is currently a sidewalk on South Main Street, so we're making a connection to the new sidewalk on Corey Street, through the railroad crossing and up to Hale Street, really connecting the residential portion in this area with the South Main Street. Zoomed in view of the rail crossing. The rail crossing will be reconstructed. We're planning to use precast concrete panels for the wearing surface, so a good durable surface for the traffic that this road sees. High percentage of trucks here, and so we did want to make sure we have a durable surface there. From the cars that are on the western approach, would have overhead cantilever flashers, high visibility for cars as they come down the hill. A little bit further to the east, we would also have a flashing warning light and sign partially up the hill, which would activate when a train is in the crossing, and it would help to notify cars and especially trucks that are coming down the hill that there is a train at the crossing and that they would need to stop. On the eastern approach, for cars that are traveling in the eastbound direction, there would just be the pedestal mounted flashers, plenty of sight distance there to be able to see those flashers. Talked about new stormwater treatment. So this is just to the east of the rail crossing. There'd be a new stormwater treatment swale where we would collect stormwater that is flowing down Corey Street, and it would, the purple lines here represent stormwater piping system. So we would collect that stormwater and it would flow into the stormwater treatment swale, treated, and then eventually enter back into the conveyance system. This is just a view of the overhead utility lines. It's a little bit faint here, but in the plan view, the red lines show the proposed location of the utility lines. It may look a little bit similar as it does today. However, much of our widening will be to the south on Corey Street. And so as you can see in the pictures down below here, we've got utility poles that are pretty much right against the roadway. So those will need to be set back into the area that has previously been excavated. So I just wanted to pause and talk about, the project has had, one phase of construction in the field already to really cut back the bank here, cut back this slope to make way for the widening of Corey Street. And the reason one of the biggest reasons we had to do it as a separate phase is to allow for relocation of those utilities ahead of the widening project. So the first kind of construction phase was completed in 2017, cutting back that bank, installing a small retaining wall. This is a view of the whole project. It's just it's an overview. It may be hard to see because it is such a large scale, but there is quite a bit of buried utility construction as well. The purple lines all represent the drainage, as we talked about previously. It's hard to see here, but there is also sewer reconstruction and water line reconstruction, mostly between South Main Street and Hale Street. I'll note as well that the drainage infrastructure in South Main Street is it's very small diameter pipes there, much smaller than we would install today. So part of this project includes installation of a new stormwater outfall, which conveys the stormwater from the Quarry Street area west across this parcel and then into the river over here. It's Stevens Branch, Third Branch, Stevens Branch, Stevens. This slide is just showing a portion of the right of way and the property lines. So the red lines that have the longer dash, the short dash, and the longer dash represent existing right of way lines. The lines that are comprised of the short dashes represent property lines. So this is showing the western end of the project. We do have fairly minor right of way impacts here, some on South Main Street, some along Quarry Street. There will be both permanent and temporary rights. So this is slide one. Slide two is just a little bit further to the east. I did want to point something out here. This doesn't necessarily go to the need of the project, but it is a nice benefit for the city of Berry. Current roadway is roughly, I think if you follow this white dashed line, is roughly in this location. And as you can see, it's outside of the existing right of way. We found this in our right of way research that really the existing roadway is outside of that right of way. So as part of the project, we are going to clean up all the right of way so that in its final form, we will establish the new right of way, purchase right of way on the city's behalf that does encompass the entire roadway, the new roadway. So just a recap of project construction. I misspoke earlier when I was talking about kind of the first phase of construction. Really, the first phase occurred in 2013 with removal of the houses along the south side of Quarry Street. I believe there was 4 properties there that were purchased and the residences were demolished. This allowed for some temporary work to be completed to really improve that intersection geometry. The southern side of that intersection is now much wider than it was previously, allowing for trucks to navigate that turn a bit more successfully. Phase 2 was completed in 2017, and that's the slope work along the south side of Quarry Street, pushing that slope back and installing a small retaining wall. And then phase 3 is targeted for 2024. That would include the rest of construction, so the utility relocations, all of the roadway work, the widening, the railroad crossing, intersection signalization. So just graphically showing, this is kind of the phase 3 milestone timelines. We finished our preliminary design in 2020. We're currently in the right-of-way process, as we noted earlier. Final design for the project is anticipated to begin mid-22 into mid-23, and then we'll be bidding the project for construction towards the end of 23, with field construction anticipated for that 2024 season. I did want to mention a few project risks that we've identified. Traffic control for this project. We are working through traffic control phasing right now. So we do identify that as a risk for potential delays during construction, and we'll be taking a very close look at that. Right-of-way acquisition. Anytime we need to buy permanent or even temporary rights, we need to go through the Uniform Act. I forget the full name of it, shortened to the Uniform Act, which V-Trans will be purchasing rights on behalf of the city. But we do need to negotiate with property owners if there's if negotiations go longer than anticipated, it could mean short delays in the project. We do have the utility relocations to plan for. While we have a full grasp of the buried utilities, The aerial utilities are all owned by private companies. So we would need to coordinate with those companies to move their utilities. Material cost escalation, I think, is something that we're all concerned about all the time, but especially recently, we've seen material costs soar. Hopefully they stabilize again. Subsurface conditions, while we do make an effort to have subsurface investigation plans and complete those and take samples, it is still very difficult to fully characterize all the subsurface conditions. So I think that's usually a risk with projects. And then contaminated materials. We've done a screening, desktop screening. We feel it's probably a lower probability that we encounter contaminated materials, but there is that possibility as well, especially in a developed area such as Corey Street. So I want to summarize the costs. These are project costs. So these would include all of the engineering, the right of way, and the construction. So phase one was about 1.2 million. Phase two, about 500,000. And then phase three, which is planned for 2024, about 6.1 million. Again, each of those is kind of broken down into the engineering, the right of way, and construction costs. So total project cost of about 7.8 million. And then it's really important to note this funding split. So this project is paid for with 95% federal funds, 3% state funds, and then there's 2% local match. And in this case, because part of the project is in the city and part is in the town, it's divided even further. So 1.71% is the city's responsibility, and then 0.29% would be the town's responsibility. We will have more public outreach moving forward. We are currently undergoing property owner meetings, which is part of the right-of-way process. We'll have additional public meetings as the project advances and the design comes to completion, and we're getting ready for construction. And then during construction, we'll have construction phase, public outreach to keep people informed. So with that, I guess I want to open the floor for questions.
Aaron, I have a question about on Route 14. The drawing didn't show the sidewalk on the western side. That's not touched. The sidewalk is still there. So you're just working on everything from the curb east.
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
we're not planning to remove that sidewalk.
Right. Thank you. Jake?
One question I have is kind of the impacts to the residents on Hale Street and the adjacent other residential properties. Are there any design features to mitigate the negative impacts of additional truck traffic, such as a raised berm or vegetative plantings, or potential buyouts? Because I suspect some of their property values are going to drop. And when I look at this project, I kind of see a project that has already destroyed grand list value in the city. You said we've removed 4 tax-paying properties. We get about $147,000 a year, as I understand it, in state highway aid to run a 50-mile system, enough road to drive over to Lebanon, New Hampshire. Struggle to keep up, and this looks like a new a $7.8 million liability with ongoing operational costs related to stormwater and striping and signal maintenance. And so I'm concerned about the financial sustainability of the city's financial sustainability to be able to do this. We have a $12 million annual budget. So you can imagine $7.8 million project and $12 million budget, and thinking about the ongoing operational costs and the fundamental basis for us being able to provide transportation services throughout the city is our real estate value. And so what's being done to protect real estate value it remains adjacent to these improvements.
Well, I guess I'm not completely sure how to answer that question. I think, it's an existing transportation facility right now. There are going to be some right-of-way acquisitions. We're not planning to acquire any additional full parcels, so it's just parts of parcels. So I think, in the end, we're not, I think that the biggest impacts are the south side, which are already completed. And then the north side should be fairly similar as it is today. There will be some impacts.
Well, you can imagine like a truck going down the hill, jake braking, 110 decibels, roaring into these residents' windows, and without any berms or other mitigation. That creates a health impact for those residents. That creates a financial impact and just a general well-being. But it sounds like there's nothing in this plan that would mitigate those types of impacts. What are the ongoing operational costs of this project, and who's gonna pay for them? Is it gonna be the city or the town, or is it gonna be VTrans? Is this gonna become a class 1 state highway, or will it continue to be a city right of way?
So I just want to go back to the question about the berms. I think, it's not something that has been considered as part of this project. I think if it were to be considered, it would cause even greater impacts to the right of way. And so, the berms may actually decrease the property values even further if that's something that is, as part of the project that needs to be maintained. The project is not necessarily changing the condition of the traffic in this area. So I think the truck traffic is there today. I don't think we anticipate this project is going to decrease the property values.
But it would increase capacity and therefore induce demand for potential development, I would assume, in Berrytown, and therefore has the potential to increase long-term traffic volumes. And you're saying that this extra lane is warranted, even with a signalized intersection, based on the volumes that are occurring today?
I think the lane is there. We understand the lane is there as a deceleration lane, and it's something that the town had started to construct, further up the hill. And so it's a continuation of that deceleration lane. As we get closer to the intersection, it makes sense with the traffic volumes to have the two separate turning lanes. So being able to get into the left turn lane if you're taking the left, and obviously the right if you're taking the right.
Well, yeah, it's not whether it makes sense. Is it warranted based on the traffic volumes is my question. The other question is the ongoing operational costs, and who's going to pay for those?
Yeah, so the street, both Corey Street and Vermont 14, both remain city streets. So the city is responsible for ongoing maintenance and operations. I do think that, this is going to be a new project. So we're constructing new subbase, new pavement, new curbs. And so it's likely going to be less maintenance up front. And then, as projects go through their life cycle and they get towards the end, then there may be more maintenance. Up front, there should be less maintenance.
And when it relates to kind of the pedestrian features, I know, I live on a fairly busy street, and when I have a logging truck roaring down the hill at 45 miles per hour and have a sidewalk with no separation between the lane other than a shoulder, it doesn't feel particularly safe as a pedestrian. And I'm curious, if this design has really done everything it can to minimize the geometry to both accommodate trucking and freight traffic, and at the same time making sure that the crossing distances and the security features for pedestrians have been enhanced.
Yeah, they certainly have been enhanced. I can tell you firsthand from being out there myself, walking on the side of this road. You know, it's gonna be a lot better situation than it is out there today. The 3-foot shoulder, the 5-foot sidewalk, raised sidewalk, you know, so on top of a curb, will be a significant improvement. Not to mention the improvements at the intersection with the signalized, phased, pedestrian phases that are.
And so my question about the additional lane, you're saying that is warranted to have an additional lane past the turnoff, that we need to have that additional width, based that it is warranted based off engineering studies for the current traffic, right now.
Yeah, you know, it's a good question you asked about. I'm glad you emphasized current traffic. This project's been around for a while. The original design, the original project was started a while ago. A lot of the engineering work was done in the early 2000s. We have gone back and compared the traffic volumes from that time frame with the current traffic volumes, and they are very, very similar. I think they're slightly lower right now, but very similar, definitely in the same order of magnitude. And we did go back through the signal warrants at the intersection, and it is definitely still warranted.
Thank you. I appreciate this presentation. I think it's helpful to have this, the awareness about the project. You know, it's been on the books, I think I understand, for 20 years, and I'm sure many residents may not be familiar with it. And it's nice to see a briefing like this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We look forward to being back in front of the public and providing more information as well.
I'm not sure if you can see me, Giuliano. Is it all right if I talk?
Go ahead.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to, Michael Hellion, member of the Transportation Advisory Committee. I just wanted to note that I requested for this to come before the committee, primarily because I've been on the Planning Commission for almost 9 years. It'll be 9 years in October, and this Quarry Street plan, and also from STIP, the turn off of Maple Avenue at Merchant Street, both sort of, they were not things that I was aware of. They, you know, I've been, I took part in authoring the last 2 municipal plans for the city, and neither these projects nor their objectives are part of the municipal plan. And so one of the things that I wanted to get out of this was an understanding of where did this come from? And so that's not for you to answer. You know, like Mr. Hemrick, I also, I really appreciate seeing this detailed presentation of the plan. I would really like to understand what is the process by which this became what our city is expected to, you know, to contribute to. Because to me, I mean, I feel like to do any project, there are 3 thresholds that you have to pass. The first of which is it better than not doing anything at all? And I'm really surprised at the number of things that you would actually be better off not doing anything at all. The second is it worth the cost? And obviously this is not just the cost to us as a city. There's, I mean, the $7.8 million project, you know, the money is coming from us somehow. The third threshold, after, you know, better than nothing, worth the cost, is it better than the alternatives? And my understanding is that the alternatives for this this design were last presented in 2002. I could be wrong about this. I recognize the project has moved on as though this is, you know, the best alternative, but I think that there's a lot of reason to think that both engineering and our city design practices have learned a lot in the last 2 decades. And when I look at this, what I see is, hey, what if we imagined that our city was more like an off-ramp? And I don't mean to run down your problem solving or the work of of your company in any way, because when you're presented with an engineering problem, you got to solve for the variables that you got to solve for. I think we have the wrong priorities. This project is going to get built, most likely. I don't think that I can go lay down in front of a bulldozer and stop it. But I think that what Mr. Hemrick pointed out about it being, what are the mitigating factors for pedestrians crossing here? I used to run here, and the street as it was built before, when it was, inconvenient for trucks to turn, but I mean, let me tell you, for like 100 years, trucks were turning there. It went from being around a 30-foot crossing to now, what is it, 60 feet or so at the crosswalk? It's not safe to walk across the street there. It's not safe to run across the street. I get that we're going to build this big, expensive, signalized intersection that will then make it safe to cross, but still, the cars are going to be going around the around the corner with a wide turning radius, and like, I do not want to be in front of that. Nor do I want the people who live around here to have to be in front of it. All of us said, the answers that I want to get are primarily, where did this come from? And what I want to learn from this is, how can we do this better? I hate to see us destroying our grand list, building something that essentially benefits our neighbor, not us. And it is crowding out the things that are in our plan, the things that are the priorities for our community. And they're not in the queue for, for our money from VTrans / the federal government. This is sad to me. And I appreciate all the work that you've done. And I think that when we look at this as an improvement, it's only along certain metrics. And I hope genuinely that right now, in the last 10 years, there have been 5 crashes in the area around this intersection. None of them have caused an injury. And this is according to the VTrans data. Maybe there have been more that are not reported to the state. I am willing to bet, we say, a gentle person's bet, that we're going to see these numbers change if this is built, and they're not going to change in the way that we want. And so when we say this is for safety, we will probably learn otherwise. So thanks very much for coming for this presentation. I appreciate it. I do hope that people from the city will be able to answer the question as to how did this get to be our prioritization in the STIP?
So I'm the sole city representative here, and I guess I would offer several observations. First is that my tenure is some 4 years, and so my window and my qualification to speak to how this community decided over 20 years ago that addressing both the economic and safety needs of the community appropriately with the agreement of the community and VTrans. I can't speak to that. I can tell you that as a matter of process, it absolutely occurred. And so to be able to look in the rear window and say, would we do this now, is a very legitimate exercise, but it does not negate the project work that was done. So my first observation is that, as you said, this is solely for the benefit of our neighbor. I think you're entirely overlooking the number of industries here in the city that rely on transport from the quarries for their primary function, which is finishing granite and turning it into a product that's sold. And I can't cite economic numbers for that. I can only tell you that it was a compelling reason and remains a compelling reason, although I don't have a numerical basis for that. I think the second piece to this is that the assertions that somehow correcting a deficiency that poses a very high risk, again at low probability, which is the issue of a heavily laden truck unable to stop
to avoid something in front of it. While I can't tell you what that probability is, it's a general principle of engineering that you actually attempt to design those things and mitigate them so that they're less threatening. I'm confident this does that. I actually truly understand the importance of addressing how we make our vehicle transportation features pedestrian and residentially sound, make them friendly to those environments. And I think some of the points that have been made about crossing distance are very real. At the same time, adding traffic control to that intersection to provide for the safe crossing of pedestrians is such a large step forward that the project in its entirety is a bona fide improvement for the safety of children, particularly because there are two functions this intersection fulfills: bus transport and pedestrian transport. And both of those right now are at risk without any left turn lanes there, because all of the Berrytown bus traffic that has to go up that hill actually has to sit in a queue with vehicles behind it and has no direct opportunity other than a pause in traffic to make a left turn. With a protected left turn, that issue is plainly resolved. And so there really is benefit to the intersection work. There's benefit to the roadway component, and we shouldn't overlook the issue of drainage. A portion of what hasn't been discussed here is the city's experience with the drainage from along that railroad system into what we would call the Pouliot Farm development, which includes Pouliot Avenue, North Parkside, and a number of streets out in there that are all underlain by a 4-foot diameter concrete sewer. Because the drainage that flows into that area literally comes from more than a mile uphill in Berrytown. I can't change the laws of physics, but anything that I can do that allows me to reduce the quantity and the velocity of water coming down that hill is a beneficial effect for all of the residents of Barry. Because one, I'm not doing emergency response, and two, there's less damage to the homes that are below that. So again, I think there may be some indirect values in this project that we've overlooked. And I'm not lessening at all the very legitimate issues about noise, about pedestrian safety. I think those are things that we do need to look at. But if we look at the project in its entirety, it truly is a significant benefit to the city. I failed to mention one of the points you made, that is, why isn't in our municipal plan? And I think that's a very legitimate question. One of my questions would be, how did it get out of the plan?
Does anyone else have any more questions?
Mr. Chairman, I was just curious that stormwater, it looks like a stormwater feature that's dumping into the, or going over to the, is it Streeter Brook there, or is that
Stevens Branch?
Stevens Branch? Yeah. Is that, just what is that feature? Is that going to be municipal general roads permit compliant? Or is it a stormwater feature at all, that leg that's going over to the stream?
So that feature will become a specific permit that the city of Barry holds and owns. The city currently holds a construction permit for this project. And after completion, the city will actually own a discharge permit for that. So it won't sit inside of the municipal general roads permit. It'll be a specific permit for that discharge.
Is that because it's not a hydrologically connected segment of road, or because it falls under a different regulatory regime?
It falls under a different regulatory regime by virtue of being a new construction project. So the MRGP covers all existing discharges. You break something out of that MRGP shelf, it becomes specifically regulated.
And is that water going to be treated in any way before it's discharged, or is it just an overflow into the stream?
So this water actually receives treatment as a part of the project itself. That includes the sedimentation and treatment pond prior to being discharged to the Stevens Branch, roughly some 15.
And Bill, do you have a sense of what this is going to cost to operate the city each year on an ongoing basis? It looks like it would eat up the entire state highway aid that the city gets each year. And I know that's almost twice what our paving budget was last year. And then there are other capital improvements we've been making. So do you have a sense of what the obligation is going to be?
I want to say that that is an area that the city is acutely aware of, and not just this project, but as we make improvements and move components of the city's drainage system out of that municipal roads general permit, we're picking up increased costs. The city has actually started tracking stormwater permit costs because they've risen dramatically in the last 5 years. I would fully expect this permit, because of the area that it covers, to end up costing the city between $1,300 and $2,000 a year in perpetuity.
And that, in terms of its impact on flooding, is it neutral in the net in terms of volume of stormwater that's going to result at the end of this project, or could it potentially exacerbate future flooding?
More likely that it is neutral or less. Most importantly, when we build in attenuation factors like ponds that can accumulate water and then discharge them, one of the things that we take off is the peaking factor. So if you have a rain event that happens across the city, if all that water arrives at the same time, you get a very high initial crest. And as we take any particular segment and we delay that even for 10 minutes, that 10-minute delay takes that initial crest and knocks it down. And so those are across the board very beneficial in terms of flooding factor events. So initially we get some water quality benefit, then we get a peaking factor benefit out of that stormwater detention pond. And as the storm lasts longer, in all honesty, it overwhelms virtually all of our systems.
Well, I really appreciate that expectation, and I certainly see the merits of a signalized intersection here, but I do have I get reservations when I see any impervious surface, knowing the flood risk that the city already faces and the tremendous economic costs that the flooding imposes on both private and public budgets. And it's nice to hear that this has been well studied and it's warranted, but the ongoing operational costs are certainly something in consideration. I'm sure the more that you attenuate flood risk through stormwater infrastructure, probably the more infrastructure it takes and the more cost it's going to have. And do you know, Bill, how many accidents there've been where a truck has rear-ended another car in front of it in the past, as long as data's been kept on that section of road?
I have to apologize. I don't have a sound basis to answer that. There has been, in addition to the 2 lanes, there has always been, at least for the last 25 years, an emergency outlet basin in the town that goes out into a sand pit. Again, I can honestly say I don't have any data that I've ever seen that used either. And I certainly have more than 25 years here in the area.
Well, one thing that I think would be good is to have a quantification at some point of the total operational costs to the city and where this match is going to come from in the budget related to all these signals, maintaining the signalized intersection, the stormwater, and certainly the risk factors could bump up. I assume this project cost above 7.8 million. Now that new right-of-way acquisition is still involved. So I think knowing those numbers are going to be important.
I'm gonna butt in for a second because I did earlier look up the crash statistics for this area. There is one that seems to be related to rear-ending on Quarry Street. I don't remember the date, 2015, 2016, something like that. And like I said before, all of the crashes here were vehicle damage only, property damage only, no injuries.
Any other questions? I would like to thank you for coming in and presenting this to the committee.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
We look forward to having a few more meetings. The Merchant Street, I don't know if anyone has any questions on those, but I'm not sure.
Do you folks have any information available for Merchant Street tonight, or is that something that we could ask you to come back for?
So it actually is a different project team.
Very
It has
good.
the Merchant Street intersection, but, and I'm happy to pass along the message and they can certainly come in.
Thank you. We'll move on to the speed bump seminary, Shirley Street, Josh Peters.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for your time tonight. I'm not sure how most of these proceedings go. I've only been to one other meeting like this before, but I was invited, and I am excited to talk to you guys about this because I feel like it's definitely something I've done. I am actually currently right now in front of my house, and the intersection I speak of is right behind me. This is the intersection between Seminary and Shirtlift Street. Actually, right here next to this pole is a bus stop for the children of Shirtlift, Seminary, and Brook Street School. I mean, not Brook Street School, but Brook Street School too, but Brook Street, going up to Berry City School for the elementary school. This street is hazardous in ways that I cannot deny, but what I am coming to you today about is actually just getting a simple speed bump to slow down some of the traffic that travels this road. Some of the people who travel down this road are using this street like a drag race to bypass the main street traffic, aka be it locals or be it people who happen to know this street is not as traveled as the main street. Currently on the street right now, there are no speed signs. The crosswalks are faded. There are cracks and holes, but these are not things that I'm coming to you today about at all. I, as a father of a child that stands at this bus stop and goes across the street to play with his friends, I, as a father of that kid who walks him across the street, who is also scared to walk across the street without double checking, triple checking to cross, in fear of someone speeding down the street, I am coming just for a speed bump. That is what I'm looking for today. Right now, actually, at this corner is Brook Street School. I find it funny that there are speed bumps here already, considering that this is a school zone for Brook Street School. There is currently going to be a project for a house just on the other side of Brook Street School that is apartment building that is being torn down and going to be turned into a parking lot for Brook Street School. More traffic, of course, is going to be coming into this area. And being more traffic, people are going to be more pushy to get past this traffic and to speed through this area. And of course, the children are going to be in the way of that. Now, in 2017, there was a child who was hit right here, right behind me. It was on Father's Day of 2017. She was leaving her apartment right here where her father lives to cross this street here because her father was actually across the road. And as she steps out into the street, she was struck by a car. The car did not stop. It kept going for the obvious reason that it did not want to get in trouble. Excessive speed has not only harmed children on this street, excessive speed has, I don't park in front of my own house because of the people who are not paying attention and just trying to bypass through this area, because my car and my wife's car has been struck by cars that are just blowing through here. And the resolutions to this can be numerous things, but what I am coming to you about is just a simple speed bump. Now, I've sat here, and this is my first meeting sitting here with you guys, and I was listening to the project prior to me, and all of the regulations and all of the budgeting and all of these safety measures, and the question was brought up is like, is doing nothing easier? Is doing nothing more worth it? And for the safety of the children that go to Berry City School, and for the safety of the children that go to Brook Street School, doing nothing is the worst thing that we can do for this street. And where this, I'm sure speeding happens down many streets in the city. The excessive speeds of this street, trying to bypass Main Street, is endangering the future of this city. So I am approaching you guys today, hoping to do what I can as a father and as a tax-paying citizen, to hope that you can see the reason in this. I think that's all I have to say. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Thank you, Joshua. Michael has a question. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Oh, in fact, my hand is up to say, while I was talking about the previous project as something where maybe it made more sense to do nothing, you wouldn't know this, but I had already tried to get this neighborhood on a future TAC agenda so that we can address the problems of speeding and people not feeling safe on the streets there. So I am very glad that you're coming forward. And so I just wanted to say, thanks for stepping up and saying, hey, we want one of those speed bumps. I guess my question for you is, have you seen the speed tables that have been installed as, as a test to see if they're going to work to slow down cars on some other streets in the city?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I need to apologize because I need to figure out which street I was
That's
on.
okay. Let's Air Street, maybe?
Yes, I think it was Air Street, and I travel the street myself. I'm a runner in this town also myself. I know you mentioned running down the other street at that same intersection. I run that same intersection now. I know you said you used to do in the past.
I do the other side now.
Yeah, but no, I have seen that speed bumps do slow people down, and I think that's the whole point of it. And I think the safety measures that come along. I mean, we could just throw up a sign, but a sign isn't going to slow them down. And speed bumps make a difference. They're a huge difference, and they're a low cost difference. Man, I did look up I know I'm not in budgeting where you guys are, what you guys are doing, but I did look up the cost of speed bump because I do my own fundraising with my wife, Sarah Akers. We do the kickball tournament, and we've done food for causes, and her parents do Bikers for Beth. And like, I know how much it can take to do fundraising for things. And I did look at the cost of these, and it's just not a giant cost. I talk a lot.
Go ahead, Michael.
All right, great. Yeah, so I guess my next question is for Bill. Do we have enough sense that our speed tables are effective, that we could continue, that we could consider trying them in more locations?
Short answer is, one of the things that we had wanted was limiting it to 6 year, was to make sure that
I think we might need to mute. Mute Josh. Yeah, sorry. Your background noise is cutting in. Sorry to interrupt, Bill.
So our experience with the 3 speed tables that we put in was very good. We wanted specifically to see if we had icing, snow accumulation, or water problems associated with a kind of a standard version of the speed table. And what we found is that in the locations we selected, which were all pretty much in neutral grade, meaning they're all less than 2%, they worked well. They weren't difficult to clean in the wintertime, and they didn't result in any icing issues, which were our primary concerns with speed tables. We've had some success with a speed hump on Park Street. And so these tools all have slightly different functions. The speed table is intended to allow someone to pass at a specific speed comfortably, but to prevent them from going over it faster without being uncomfortable. And the one on Air Street actually works very well. You barely know that you hit it at 17. It's in a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. If you take that same structure at 31, it gives a very uncomfortable rocking motion that literally throws the head of the driver towards the steering wheel. So it's very effective it doesn't prevent someone from doing 35, but it makes it an unpleasant experience. And it's a very effective behavioral device. The speed humps that we put on Park Street, so I should go back. Speed tables are about 2.5 inches high if you want them to pass at 25. If you wanted to slow it to 20, you raise that to about 3.25 inches. And so we can actually, by altering the design slightly, literally design a target speed for speed humps, speed tables. Speed humps are lower. The one we have on Park Street is 1 5/8 inches high. It's very effective. It gives the vehicle a tire slap and a suspension vibration that makes you feel like you're going to break your car. If you hit that at 17, your car will rattle. If you hit that at 25, you're going to hear a sound that sounds like you could almost pop a tire. The difference between the 2 tools is that in a residential area, if you have people who disrespect neighbors, they'll wake people up all night with a speed hump. And speed table, they physically can't do that because the sensation and the vehicle aren't damaged. It's just really uncomfortable. So we have different tools. The city, I expect fully to deploy more than 6 this year. We're trying to use a technique where we measure the speeds of traffic and confirm. And so anytime there's a general practice rule in civil engineering that anytime the 85th percentile vehicle speed is 10 over, it's time for a physical intervention. It's time to do something structural that alters drivers' behavior. In addition, one of the things about measuring speed is that it also provides our police department with an opportunity to see if there are patterns. And so you can actually do selective enforcement. Last year, we actually measured Merchant Street for about 3 weeks, and we literally could see somewhere between 2 and 220 every afternoon. Someone went through that street at 45 to 47 miles an hour. It's a 25-mile-an-hour zone. And so by gathering data, we actually can choose the tool we deploy. There are times where signage is beneficial because people are so far from it. But as was noted, signs don't make people slow down. There are things that induce behavioral change. The city is gonna purchase 4 flashing radar speed signs in the next 3 months. And we're gonna be deploying them on a temporary basis in different locations around the city. We know that they do have an effect on drivers when they see a reinforcement that they're speeding. They see that sign flashing at them. It actually triggers a response to say, I'm doing something. And when they're driving their car, they're not looking at their speedometer. They're kind of ignoring that and going by what feels good. And so that flashing symbol actually is literally an intellectual alert. Hey, you are doing this speed. Whether you feel it or not, you're doing this. And because it's external to the driver, they actually receive that message. We're gonna deploy more of them. The second aspect to those signs is they record all the data that they collect. And so as we deploy these, we're gonna be getting speed data to look at questions of, do we need a speed hump? Do we need a speed table? Do we need to target enforcement? And so the city, I think, is moving to respond to these. I think as neighborhoods come forward and tell us, here's our issue, it certainly reinforces the need. And it's something that we're going to be doing more of. I'm certain of that. And the city has a speed enforcement program where we've added some signs that specifically state speed enforcement zone, obey the law. They're put up and they are accompanied by increased police department patrols. And the police department is spending between 14 and 15 hours a week solely on speed enforcement because of the issues that the neighborhood associations are reporting to us. So it's really good to hear from you, Josh. And it's something that we recognize as a real important component of making our community a more comfortable and enjoyable place to be.
So Bill, we will bring up speed car data and then decide what the appropriate actions are to be.
So that is our intention for any permanent. So if we were going to put in a speed table, which again isn't inexpensive, but it's a permanent structure. We add pavement and we leave that pavement in place. We'd like to have the speed data first. We do have some speed humps that we can install and remove, and they can be reused in different locations. We're looking at deploying them with a lower standard of proof because you can bolt them in, you can take them out, you just leave the anchors. And if we find that they're effective, we may not need to actually do the speed table. So we're looking at that. We have 2 sets of them now. The city is looking at purchasing 2 more for the purpose of being able to deploy them quickly and see if they assist local residents in terms of excessive speeds in their neighborhoods.
Jake, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Josh. It's a great explanation of what's going on in Seminary Street. And I sat in on the Development Review Board hearing for the parking lot at the Brook Street School, and it was story after story of dangerous conditions for pedestrians and people just trying to get across the street and get their kids to school on a normal day. And it shouldn't be that way in the city, but I think you can see and hear from the Public Works Director that he's aware that many of these streets are dangerous by design, and that interventions are needed. And I'm hoping that the city as a whole will get to the point where we can have a citywide traffic calming plan. And one question for Bill on the just data collection is, do you feel additional investments is needed in data collection devices? And I'm curious if there are any devices you know of that measure air quality, noise, and speed all at the same time, because I think those are three environmental hazards that are affecting the quality of life in the city in a really significant way. And to the extent that we can target resources to address those three things with that throughout the city in kind of a clandestine way, because I know the speed trailer, even when it's not on, has the impact of reducing speeds. And so it's always worse than what that speed trailers indicates.
So I agree with much of what you said. I would say in terms of the question about, are there integrated tools out there that actually allow you to look at traffic, air quality, speed and noise? And to the best of my knowledge, there aren't. At an earlier point in my career, I was the director of research for V-Trans, and I did noise studies and found that there isn't a great deal of readily available noise study equipment out there. I was focused on dealing with the use of the rumble strip and trying to define how far from residences we should discontinue rumble strips in order to not basically prevent people from sleeping at night. And we spent money with a nationally recognized firm because there was nothing readily available. All of our cell phones actually have a downloadable app that will give you sound pressure levels. Unfortunately, they're not referenced to anything. And so they give you a qualitative index that has a number associated, but they're not reliable. And so sadly, I don't know of anything that will give us that noise data that would be really useful for quality of life. And I don't know a way to actually get it inexpensively. And a good portion of my training and work was in the environmental area, and I'm very familiar with, back in the day, we called it air pollution control monitoring rather than air quality. But again, those are relatively sophisticated systems that do time integrated sampling in order to get meaningful data. And so they don't catch the transients that you would be looking for with excessive acceleration. It's a short interval event, and so it gets canceled out because they collect samples that are over 8-hour or 24-hour intervals. So I don't know a way to do that. I think both are very reasonable areas of scientific inquiry, just not possible yet.
So if there are any entrepreneurs out there that want to get on the environmental justice bandwagon, maybe Bill, that you could earn a couple $1 million in later after in your retirement, inventing that machine.
He's writing that down.
I am, because there's a lot of folks out there that are looking for a way to establish a name for themselves. I might be past that in my personal endeavors.
I think that's in 2030.
The thing I was holding up, in case anyone is curious, is the sensor device that I don't have enough time to work on, but this is the radar sensor that tells how fast cars are going. It's pretty cool.
Does anyone else have any more questions?
Oh, sorry, someone was gonna say something.
Stand up and just.
Okay, hi, I don't think you can see me. I'm Dale Bernash. I live at the corner of King and Perry Streets. Joshua, you may want to stay for this because we have the same concern for Perry Street.
I think that's the next item on the agenda, right?
So you may want to stay and listen to our concerns as well. It sounds pretty much like what we're concerned about. Thank you.
I was gonna, before we move on, I was gonna ask Bill if there are streets that are already candidates for the speed hump installation, the temporary installation, and if not, whether we can put Seminary Street on this list, because it seems to me like, it's a residential street that is serving a lot of shortcut traffic, and if we can, much like we did for my brain just turned off Park Street. Yeah. Is that the street? Yeah. It's a similar sort of intervention with a similar kind of use. And so if we don't already have something, something planned, could we put this one in the queue?
So when we began developing the speed table list last year, we had 6 streets. We installed 3, Circle, Ayers, and Allen.
Sorry, I was only asking about the I forget the speed bump, the little one, the temporary one. Sorry.
That we have. So our second location was going to be Merchants Row on the long axis. Again, we have there's over 170 parking spaces, more than 100 crossings to that street twice a day. And we have speeds that we recognize exceed 30 miles an hour in a zone that we would like to have limited to 15. It was supposed to have been installed by June 15th. It's past July. It's not there. The delivery time on those is 2 weeks. So what I would tell you is it's entirely possible for us to redirect the undeployed segment of speed hump to Seminary. And I think in terms of being able to gather both community support and get some anecdotal feedback, it's probably a good location to try.
Got it. I think I maybe misunderstood what you were saying before. I thought you were saying we had more that we were considering where to put.
We do have one literally now sitting on a shelf over in the DPW building, and we're purchasing 2 more.
You were saying that when you were.
Could you just,
Hi.
stand up so that-
Sure, sorry.
You and then-
Hi, I'm Kira Sakis. I'm a resident of Perry Street as well. And you were mentioning, Bill, that there were 6 streets that were discussed. You brought up 3 of them, but I didn't catch what the other 3 were. And, I get the gist that you're sort of in the where to go next with those 3 and beyond.
So River Street, we have a playground, the Benetti playground that we're concerned about. I believe, and I'm responding on memory now rather than reading from something, so I'm going to apologize.
That's okay.
The other, we had one in the north end, and I believe it was Brook Street. And we had another in the southeast corner, and I believe that was Berlin Street or Prospect. But I can make certain that I actually supply that information to the scribe for this meeting, and allow that to be added as an informational footnote to the meeting notes.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll move on to 6.3. That's the Perry Street traffic concerns.
It doesn't.
Joy?
Okay, great. I'm gonna stand again. Hi, it's Kira Karasakis again. My husband and I, John, live near the corner of Washington and Perry Street. So there's a restaurant there that go melt down and then you kind of come up the way. And we've got folks here tonight sort of from all along the way to Mo and his wife Bonnie who live at the other end of Perry Street. And first of all, I don't know, we haven't been there that long. We live a couple of blocks away, but we did when we bought the building that we live in now. There was a lot of excessive damage to the sidewalks, and it was dangerous, ice and tripping and so on and so forth. And the road was in pretty rough shape. And I just personally, over the moon, we all feel like it's turned out beautifully, the paving and the new sidewalks and fire hydrants are all tremendously welcomed. And the workers that were there were good guys, a good group of guys, hardworking, did a good job, so bravo. I know that that can't have been an inexpensive, in any way, and coming off of COVID and furloughs and budgets for basically all of the United States being completely put on the heads, and our little state, sending so many people home, we know it's a big deal. We are here tonight, though, because we've got concerns that are ongoing about what happens with the way that Perry Street works is when you're coming off of Washington, either if you're going up Washington or down Washington, and I'm sorry, I don't know the north, south, east, west thing, but you have to kind of get yourself going to get over sort of the rise there to come to a crest, and then it sort of levels off, and then it starts to taper down, and then you're on a big downhill to go down Hill Street. And what happens inevitably is there's no way to get around the dangerousness of being a pedestrian, of trying to get out to your car, of having your car out there, trying to be in front of your own property, because when people are getting speed up,
They don't let go.
they don't let go, and they just keep zooming, and then they get to the other end and they're still zooming and not stopping, and there's might be cars coming down the street. And so one of the things that we had talked about as concerned homeowners and residents of a private street, it connects South Main Street and Washington, and we get 18-wheelers, we get people when it wasn't paved that wanted to see how far they could spray rocks and gravel going at all times of day or night. I'm scared to park my car out front when it's legal, and we have tenants that are afraid to park on the street, let alone walking on the street. I've got a puppy, a 6-month-old puppy, and believe me, I'm from harness, and he sticks close to me, but still, I'm nervous because people go so fast. We're really, really, like Josh, are really interested in what we can do to be heard around speed bumps, and possibly more than one, because of the way that the nature of you have to get our speed going both directions. Now, I did see something recently on the Berry City website that showed that there are some plans for Perry Street, and I think it's more on the Hill Street side of things. But chatting with Mo one day, he said that there's some things changing, maybe a stop sign is going in, but I would really like to know more, and maybe it's, what the city's plans are, and have they looked at the way this works, and the fact that so many folks are using this as a way to get around traffic, which it sounds like is happening all over town. People are trying to use a back street and they're going really fast. And, we live there, it's our neighborhood, we're out, and it's really scary.
Bill, can I speak? My name is Mo Millard. I live on the other end she's talking about. And we've been there 40 years. And before we moved there, they were supposed to redo our street. It took them 40 years to do our street. They put nice new sidewalks in. Like she said, the guys are excellent. But the problem is, it's lack of communication. That we know what's going on. And that road has always been a shortcut to South Main Street, over to Washington Street. And what they do is they come up Hill Street, they fly through that intersection, even though they're supposed to stop for the people coming down Hill Street. They go to the other end, and then they have to stop. There used to be yield signs at both ends of that street. A couple of years ago, they put a stop sign on the Washington Street stripe. This time, I've already been talking to the city. I finally got the information that I've asked for about what's going on my end. That's going to be done. And so I've heard so far, Bill can tell me if it's true or not, they're changing that to a stop sign. That's the first thing they need to do, because now they can, even if they speed through there, they gotta stop. And now it's a yield sign. And what they do is they look, nobody comes and fly up. They have caused more accidents because people come down Hill Street, think they have to stop and they don't have the right of way. And there's been rear-enders there. What they want to do with the sidewalk continuation, I'll discuss that, and I'll go via Bill and I have discussed it. I'm not going to go into it because it's a done deal thing. But the plans down the road is if the bill says it's true, it's gonna make that intersection better, they think. But it's gonna add a sidewalk to the other side, down the road. So that way people use that unsidewalk side now more than they do the one with the sidewalk, because they can't come up and turn across on Hill Street, so they stay on that side when they come across South Main Street. Because the only crosswalk they have is down on South Main Street, going across Hill Street to go to Air Street, and there's another crosswalk. So what their concern is, and my concern is too, is, because I've been there 40 years, and they fly through there. When there was dirt, that road was the best it's been for the last 10 years, because they just keep filling the potholes. So when the potholes were there, people had to slow down because they didn't want to ruin their car. Now, when the dirt was there, it was smooth again, and they started speeding through there. Now with the blacktop there, they go like 40, 50 miles an hour, because what they do is they start coming, they don't slow down. We're lucky that we don't have that many young children that live on Perry Street. But you have kids on Queen Street, you got kids on King Street, but they get picked up by the bus right now. But once they get out of school and go to the high school, they're either gonna have to walk or they're gonna be bused by the parent. My concern is, if you're gonna put speed bumps in, you gotta put them in the proper places. Everybody says they want them, but nobody wants them in front of their house. And that's the problem is if you look at where they put the one in Air Street, it makes sense, but it doesn't. Because the railroad tracks slow you down to almost a complete stop because of how they're designed. When they hit the speed bump under 25, it's just like a little hump. But once they get on the other side, there's nothing slowing them down on Air Street. So when they get towards the school, they back up to 35, 40 miles an hour. Because I did that area as a postal carrier for 20 years, and I've seen almost all these intersections, and I know what's going on with them, because I've been out there trying to cross them. And then talking to Bill, they are gonna put some signs up. One of the signs I recommend they do too is, I'm not trying to cut anything down, but where 20 Perry Street is, where Sarah lives, there's a restaurant just opened. It's been vacant for 10 years, they opened a restaurant. From the top of that hill down on both sides, there should be no parking. Because in the wintertime, when they got cars flying there, when you come down the hill, you gotta stop, your car slides to the curb, because that's the way the road slants on the grade. I mean, I'm not trying to hurt anybody, but they put 16 parking spots down by the old middle school. That's called the historic site now. There's spaces on Washington Street that are plain, so cars can park there. And after 4 or 5 o'clock, they have the right to park in the dental office. Or after 3:30, they can park over at McFarland House where the state is. So there's plenty of parking for them to use. But I'm just saying, when they do what they're supposed to do on my end of the street, nobody's gonna be able to come up on my street from Hill Street on a right-hand turn because of how it's gonna be designed. And I'm, like I said, so people are going in, like she says, there's 18 wheelers on that street. There was a sign up there 10 years ago, because one of the ladies complained about it, to keep them off in it. Somehow the sign's gone, and now they're back doing it. Just this morning at 7:30, there was a prime 18-wheeler went by my house on that street, and he wasn't doing no 25 miles an hour. So my concern is, if you're gonna put speed bumps, they gotta be coordinated with where they should be. And there's 2 spots that I can see that'd be more proper place to put them than where, I don't know what the city's gonna. Like I said, Bill and I have been working on that on my end of the town, my end of the street. These guys, like I said, the street is beautiful now. Like I said, took 40 years to get it, but I'm happy. And like I said, so we came tonight because of concern of the traffic. I know what you're talking about the speed monitors, they work fine. But the thing is, we have never, ever seen a cop on our street or on King Street, Queen Street, monitoring speeders. Never. I've been there 40 years. So I'm just saying, if you're going to use 14 hours of police sitting and watching speeding, they need to sit where all neighborhoods, not just on Washington Street or Merchant Street, but the thing is, we all need to be protected for our property. Like I said, I just lost quite a bit of my property with the new sidewalk. So like I said, they improved it for the kids and it's fine, but the thing is they need to prove it now for the homeowners that live there, because a lot of us go for walks because most of us are retired, close to retirement. We want to enjoy our life. And that street is a quiet neighborhood because there's no truck, and they're all older people. All I'm just saying is, the speed bumps will help, and like the guy on, I know what the guy's talking about by Brook Street. That is a speed trap, because what the people do, they take Summer Street over to Maple Street, and then they run down Seminary Street, so they don't have to go through the 2 traffic lights, and they don't have to be slowed down by the traffic, and they just use it as a speed trap. So that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Mo. Maybe you should start with stop sign. I think that was the question first, and then go to the speed limits.
I have had conversations with folks there on Perry Street. I also have had the pleasure, my 4th child is going to Spalding now, and so I've been doing that daily delivery. I've watched folks come out of Perry Street, presuming that rather than them yielding for the sign, that Hill Street, by the rule of the road, yield to the right, places the responsibility on Hill Street. And so as a traffic design initiative, rather than allowing that to be an intersection, and I'm gonna hold my hands up, that comes together at about a 50 or 60 degree angle and people can drive right through. We're gonna convert that. It will actually, Perry Street is gonna receive a left turn at its end where it meets Hill Street. And that will change that intersection from being something that meets at an angle where you can drive through it to where you can't drive through it. And our goal there from the city's perspective is twofold. We want to prevent traffic leaving Perry Street going into Hill from being able to try to slipstream into the Hill Street traffic. And the second objective is to deal with Hill Street traffic turning left onto Perry, which rather than making a left turn, traverses more than 120 feet of Hill Street in the wrong lane as they drive on a straight line off of Hill into Perry. So that intersection is going to become essentially a T intersection with a stop. And as you're going towards Hill Street, there'll be a left-hand turn where you come around and see Hill Street at almost a 90 degree angle. It'll be better than 80 degrees. And from a traffic safety perspective, this comes back to how drivers perceive traffic. Your peripheral vision only works out to somewhere right around 80 degrees. And so if I'm driving along and something's coming from behind me outside of that, I can't see it. And by bringing traffic around so that they come into full view of Hill Street, literally every driver's peripheral vision who comes off of Perry Street, whether they actually are smart enough to look or not, we're going to make traffic visible to them. And so a key piece of this was to make that turn, convert it from a yield to a stop. It hasn't been done for one reason, and that is because I have to put 150 feet of water line in Hill Street. And when I do that, I'm actually going to close Hill Street, use Perry as a temporary primary route. I expect it to be no more than a 2-day job. But when we complete that, we're going to redo the pavement on Hill Street and adjust the end of Perry Street. And right now, that's scheduled to occur within the next 6 weeks. But we were trying to get both Perry and Camp Street in a passable condition before opening up Hill Street. So we know we need to make changes to that. Mo had mentioned that we're going to be, as we bring that street around, we're going to bring a sidewalk on the south or east side of that, the left-hand side as you're facing downhill. And we're going to add a crosswalk on Hill Street. I've heard residents' concerns that Hill Street is just too difficult for a crosswalk. I don't have an alternative now, and from the pedestrian network, I really need to connect that northeast portion of the city to the south end, towards the Berry City Elementary School. And Perry Street is a very good connection for that purpose. So my temporary, at least temporary, it worked out, it might remain permanently, was to put a crosswalk. We positioned the crosswalk so that the site distance uphill and downhill are both greater than 300 feet. And the stopping distance, if someone wore Noble and followed the speed limit, the downhill stopping distance is less than 200 feet at 25 miles an hour. The uphill stopping distance is less than 170. And so we have plenty of sight distance for the person who's paying attention and follows the law. With respect to the concerns from the residents, one of the things that it's made me aware is that if I were to add a new sidewalk on Hill Street, on what is the west side, then what I would end up doing is I'd make the crosswalk, sidewalk would remain on Perry. They would come to the intersection of Hill and Perry, and instead of crossing Hill, they would cross Perry to a sidewalk that ran all the way down to the intersection where the light allows them to cross Hill Street. And again, I don't have that scheduled right now, but I envision it as something that could easily happen within a 5 to 6 year period, or sooner if we find that the Hill Street crosswalk is ineffective. So we basically, the construction on Perry helps us make the pedestrian connection. We recognize that we've had a bad intersection design at the intersection of Perry and Hill. We're going to change that. I've talked with the police department. Their first location for the speed card is Camp Street. The second location will be Perry Street. I'm especially interested in getting that stop condition because it will change traffic that comes up Hill Street from coming up at 25 or 30. They will not be able to negotiate that corner at much over 15. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean that they can't find the throttle and crest the hill at an unreasonable speed, but we will successfully lower the speed of traffic coming uphill and turning on Perry. So kind of the short answer to this is folks' concerns are well placed, and the city recognizes that. We do look to use speed intervention measures. We want to try to set a standard that we can use for every street so that as residents say, it worked there, can we do it here? I have a basis to say, yes, they're warranted here, or no, they're not. And that is really one of the underpinnings to our program now, is trying to make sure we have speed data that confirms the choice that we're making.
I do have one more question though. This is Mo talking again. I understand that you want to put a connection from Washington Street to South Main Street lower, but you have 2 streets above us, French Street, College, actually Liberty Street, that have sidewalks on both sides of their street. So my concern is, if they're worried about the only street that's below Perry Street with kids on it is Mount Street. The Highland Avenue kids, and Highland Avenue and Bolster Avenue is the same way. When those people come out the end of their street, they have to walk down, either down to Perry Street, cross from Perry Street, over to Washington Street to go on down by the Historic Society. Or if they're on, or if they want to go up and cross Washington Street, they gotta go all the way up to the 4 corners, where Washington and Hill Street Main. So like my theory is they could have put a crosswalk right across the end of French Street. It would cost us less money, and it would have done the exact same thing what they're trying to do now. Because I'm retired now, I've lived here 40 years. I walk into every year from the cars coming down without a crosswalk. I can't imagine what's going to happen this winter when there's a sidewalk out there, and kids are going to try to walk out there and get hit or get hurt. Because when they changed the light on Hill Street in Washington from a flashing red and yellow light, it turned to a regular red, green, and yellow. 2 months in, there was a major accident there that killed people that were in high school. And I've been in, like I said, that was the first accident there. When it was the other way with people respecting each other, they were more courteous. Once you put up a stoplight everything changes. The light dictates what you're gonna do. If you coming down the hill and it's yellow, you can sit down there in that little parking lot on South Main Street and just watch the cars fly through. And it might turn red and 2 cars go through that red light, because they know there's delays coming off South Main Street. So I'm just saying that, my concern is I think we're wasting, I'm wasting money doing what they want, but that's my personal feeling. And like I said, I've been a taxpayer here for 40 years. And like I said, $300 for paint for the crosswalk up on Front Street. I don't know what's gonna cost us when they finish that intersection down there, but the sign does need to be changed to a stop sign like they did on the other end of Perry Street. That would make those people have to stop. So if a cop came down the hill, going up the hill, they see a car flying through it, they can turn around and pick them up. Now, they can just say, well, it's a yield sign. I look both ways, I looked up the hill, like Bill said, I didn't see anybody, and zoom, right in front of someone. We just had a fender bender 2 weeks ago, because a car was coming up Hill Street, guy was going around the corner, the guy thought he could beat him, come up Hill Street, go to Perry Street, and T-bone that poor guy on the side of his car, and all he was doing was trying to get home from work. So I'm just saying that there's other options, but that's my opinion. That's why I came tonight, is I wanted to voice them. So thank you.
Are there any questions?
Yes, I have one. My name is Debbie Plants. I live on Perry Street. I'd like to know, is it legal for the 18-wheelers, the tractor trailers, to drive on Perry Street? And I don't know if it's legal, okay. But my next thing is there any way the city can address that?
I don't think I have that answer.
Oh,
There used to be, excuse me, Morgan, there used to be a no truck sign down by the bottom of my house on the corner, there's no big trucks coming up Hill Street, because what happens is, most of them come out South Main Street, they don't wanna go through the city, so they come up Hill Street, and they made the turn wider up on Washington Street, because they pulled that turn lane back so they can get around it. So what they do now is, hey, I'm gonna go down to Summer Street, I ain't gonna go through that, I just shoot across Perry Street, because there's no sign. There used to be a sign there, so it must have been under ordinance once to have that sign there. And the other thing is, there's no parking on the side where there's no sidewalk, people park on that side. And there's one sign down on the end of Perry Street by Spalding, we need another one on the other end, they just put a brand new fire hydrant, that'd be a perfect place to put the other one. So people, when they come through, could see, no parking on the side of the street.
I don't remember the signs being there on Perry Street, but there's a no truck sign on West Patterson, and on our street, Camp Street, the lower part, there's signs too. No one follows them. Signs are not, I see dump trucks go up West Patterson, there's all sorts of truck traffic going up Camp Street. Even if there was a sign, I think you'd still have 18 renters.
Police enforcement.
I'm gonna take the
Mr.
question.
Chairman, if I could just jump in, Bill, because I have a question related to this trucking that maybe it gets past a sign, and I think it's the same thing with the speed enforcement, putting up a sign below a speed limit sign, it just doesn't seem to be change behavior. It takes either a steady enforcement effort, which, as I understand it, the police department struggles to resource, or actual geometric changes to the street. And I'm wondering, with the T intersection at Perry Street, if that's going to prevent a truck from making that turn off hill, and what type of intervention could happen, whether it be a bump out where the turn radius is too tight for an 18-wheeler to make that turn. Because I think, it's surprising though, it's still on Camp Street, we see 18-wheelers and there's tight turn radii and street poles, but I think we need to at least start and then look at the framework for freight and trucking in the city. And I was just curious, Bill, of what's your vision for freight regulation and trucking routes? Because as I understand it, the police department gave up on it, and they have the scales, but they chose not to maintain their certifications. They aren't doing any overweight enforcement. They aren't doing, the signs are up, but they don't have, there's no backing in the ordinance. And I think this is a trend that we need to turn around somehow. And thank you, Mo and Debbie, and the fourth and fifth person. I didn't get all your names. Sorry, I'm not there tonight. I have some cold symptoms and I was just being extra cautious.
So I want to maybe take them in pieces. The creation of that 90-degree intersection will actually make it more difficult, but not necessarily impossible, for a tractor trailer to make a left turn on Perry. I can tell you that with the intersection width at 28 feet and the curvature to the right on Hill, that if the driver does not plan properly, he won't be able to make that turn. And so if he doesn't actually drive past the intersection and cut the tractor into a 90-degree turn, the trailer is gonna actually hang up on the curb on the low end side of that intersection. So it is designed not to prevent it, but to vigorously discourage it. And one of the options that the city faces is to look at making those, I'm going to use the word, less elastic. And so in a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, a Jersey curb placed in the right placement behind a curb has a profound effect even on a tractor trailer. And as we're looking at the crossing on Hill Street, one of the things that we're actively considering is providing a safe zone for the crosswalk by using a Jersey barrier section set perpendicular to the road, but outside of the curved section, so that it isn't a traffic hazard at a 25-mile-an-hour speed. It is an incredible impediment to something coming through that. And so we're looking at ways we could make that intersection more durable for compliance. Folks have asked about truck traffic and dealing with it. And so there was a 16,000-pound weight limit sign on Lower Hill Street. When the state came through and did the South Main Street project, and I believe it was 2017, I think it was the first year that I worked for the city, they removed it. The state has a procedure that's required that requires the filing of all weight restricted streets with the state by February 10th of every year. I have not been able to find any records of the city ever filing that report or ever formally reducing weight restrictions. And so that is a project that the engineer's office is looking at. One, making sure that we have the proper materials to make the filing, and two, that we can sustain a challenge to that from a trucking company. So we can restrict the weights, and one of the things that many people don't realize is that the 24,000-pound statewide load limit doesn't really mean a vehicle only weighs 24,000 pounds. A 5-axle tractor trailer with a 24,000-pound state load limit may weigh up to 80,000 pounds. And so when we limit that to a 16,000-pound road, it does prorate the maximum weight of that truck. And so it moves from 80 to, I believe, 60,000, 3/4 of that. It's actually 2/3, my apologies, 56,000. But in essence, that doesn't make our streets no truck, but it protects our streets from damage from full weight trucks. We've made some changes in our design strategy for our pavements. And so we have streets that we know trucks, in terms of supporting our kind of common way of life, whether it's fuel trucks, my own plow trucks loaded with sand, are going to traverse some of these streets a great deal. And so we just did Hill Street. Hill Street, I suspect it had a bad base. It actually was very good. It had a very thin pavement. We put back a pavement on Hill Street. I'm sorry, I'm talking about Camp. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Camp Street had a 2-inch layer of pavement on it, we've gone back to 3.5. I can tell you that should reliably last 20 years, even with truck traffic at the 24,000 pound limit. So by choosing those connections that we have to make available for commerce, for our own benefit, and making them durable, the city can actually reduce its costs. And so we have better tools for design now than we did in the past, designing pavements, designing intersections, and we're actively trying to deploy them. The limitation of trucks, again, is something that actually is separate from weight limits. And Councilor Hemrick has talked about looking at what should be truck routes and what shouldn't be, and trying to make those distinctions. And that is something that is within the community's authority, and something that the community can go through and do in a way, and critically apply good standards that protect us. At the same time, we don't want to apply standards that we turn around and look the other way because we need a service. And whether that service is a furniture delivery or a fuel oil delivery or a propane delivery, we have to figure out how we accommodate that. And again, there are ways to do that. The advantage of doing it in a comprehensive way is that you can actually lay out a planned network that carries those heavier trucks and makes certain they can get to every component of the city without necessarily making every street at that same standard. So our residential streets will only have 2.5 inches of pavement on them because that's adequate. But some of the streets that carry that commercial traffic, DPW will be making an effort to assure they last longer. Perry Street was a 2.5 inch pavement depth because we don't see it as ever actually being a substantial commercial route.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I do have a question. John Cherisakis again. The design of Hill and Perry and the reconfiguration is all great, and the way you're describing it is very positive, and it should have a positive effect and impact. What concerns us at the other end of the street is that racetrack that just got created for these cars to reach the other end. We'd like to talk about what our options are. We too believe that increased enforcement would mitigate that problem. But I think combined with, or we feel combined with some of those bumps or humps or whatever you talk along the way, that will deter people from picking up speed. And by the time they get to the other end, they have no choice but to come to a stop to get onto Hill Street. So what does the city have to
It's
say
a
about
two-way
that?
thing.
Sure,
Yeah.
it's on both ends.
Spoken a
And
lot about
we
that.
understand where we live, the first building, there is an elevation, so you do require some momentum to get up. Is that once you get up on that, your momentum, your foot is still on the gas. You're not letting go. Right there is where if we attack it, they'll slow down.
This is Kira again, I'm sorry to interject, but there are no street signs posted for what the speed is. So people are probably doing 30, 40, 50. This is real.
Yeah.
This is what we're living with. I was outside gardening yesterday, and within the space of an hour and a half, I heard 4 cars screeching up the street. And why? Because it's newly paved. I went to the dentist. I have a new dentist. This kid lives in South Barry. We bought our first home in South Barry. You live on Perry, they just paved it. I'm thinking, oh, the word's out. Great. Okay,
Right.
well then. So, you know, the issue of speed, and on both sides of the street, just like with Hill, you have to have momentum, and when there's inclement weather, it's even worse, right? And so with Washington, you're either coming down a pretty good grade or you're going up a pretty good grade, and you're coming around the corner onto Perry Street, and it requires speed. If there's nothing to encourage people to then lift off of that. When they crest over that top, they're coming around a blind corner. And I'm sitting and watching most nights where that time in the afternoon, where if there's a car parked in front of the building and someone's gonna just whoop around it at 45 miles an hour, and somebody's coming up and they're gonna pick up speed, this is what I'm looking at.
Dale.
Yeah, hi, this is Dale Bernash. I'm toward the middle of Perry Street. Like I said, I'm at the corner of King and Perry Street. And yeah, I agree with what Kira just said. And I'm gonna tell you, even last night around 2:30, you could hear some vehicles speeding through there. And I have my anecdotes as well as far as the experiences of traffic on Perry Street at all hours of the day. So yeah, so Deb and I, we live about the same area on Perry Street, across the street from each other. But yeah, it is. As much as I like the street and it's being redone, you know, it's great, the sidewalks and all. I'm very, very concerned. I just retired from Berry City Elementary and Middle School. I'm a retired teacher. So I know what it's like early in the morning and in the afternoon as well, as far as my students, my former students now, you know, going back and forth from home to school. So yeah, thank you.
All right, is there anything else on the Perry Street traffic concerns?
Yeah, I want to add that this is what we hear. Like, I really appreciate all of the residents coming in and expressing your frustration. But I mean, I'm also on the planning commission, and last year we ran a survey we tried to get out to as many people in the city as possible, saying like, hey, what's your experience with the streets in the city? You know, like, rate your problems. Speed is the problem. Like, what we are facing is an epidemic of speeding. And what is our response to it? It is laughable. Like, the idea that we're going to target this one place and fix it here, it doesn't make any sense. We need a holistic approach to controlling speeding in the city, not because we don't like speeding, but because, you know, we like to not die. We like to not have our pets die. We like to not have our kids die. I mean, you guys might not know this, the visitors, and Bill definitely does. So I'm not telling Bill, but like, if you're hit by a car that's going 20 miles per hour, you have a 9 in 10 chance of surviving this impact. If you're hit by a car that is going 40 miles per hour, you have a 9 in 10 chance of dying. So these speeding differences, they really matter. And I share your frustration. I live on Orange Street, and we do not see the traffic that that a lot of other streets that are better connectors see. But even on this street, while we don't see the volume, I still regularly record cars that are going in excess of 40 miles per hour on like a street that doesn't go anywhere. So I don't bring this up to say, oh, my problem, oh, so sad, but to say, I see where you're coming from, and I am deeply frustrated that across city government, our response is inadequate.
Yeah, no, if I could just build on that, I would echo that, you know, we need systemic change to how this transportation system is planned, and the capital investments and how those are organized, and our enforcement approach citywide. I live on a street that has, you know, Hill Street and Camp Street has about 5,000 cars pass it every day. It's the conditions of speeding are horrendous. It's unlivable. And I think it reflects past investments by the city that reflect highway and road engineering values and not city street engineering values, which to Mo's point about the signalized intersection at Hill Street, is that, you know, that when there was a flashing red, people had to respect each other. There was a complexity there that made people communicate and wasn't a forgiving design. And what my observation is, what over many decades and certainly long before Bill's tenure, is that the city has prioritized through traffic for people that do not respect city people, city places, and it's really affecting the quality of life in the city. I issued a town meeting survey separate from the planning commission meeting. Number one issue for people: speed, traffic, trucking, and noise amplification, noise amplifying vehicle. That's what they want to see from their city government. And where are we looking at spending upwards of $500,000 at an intersection on Quarry Street? And with ongoing operational costs that for a transportation system that this city just struggles to afford. In a city with one of the highest tax rates in the state, we should be able to get more for our money. So I hear your frustration. On city council, we're working for, I'm working for change. Melshon Bell, Ward 1 city councilor, and I walked over to Perry Street over the weekend on Sunday. The paving looks great. I think that the intersection alignment Bill is proposing is an improvement. I think an increased density of crosswalks are an improvement and good investments. But we can't stop there. We can't just stop at individual reactions. We need a comprehensive citywide traffic calming plan, and it's certainly something I'll be pushing for. And again, thank you for coming tonight and bringing these concerns, and they're relatable, I think, to everybody who sits on this committee. And I think it also relates to one other thought, to our land use patterns in our neighboring communities. If you look up Vermont's smart growth principles and our Planning and Development Act, Berry City is a place that meets smart growth. Unfortunately, that's not the case everywhere. And we need to make sure our city transportation system sustains city livability, city quality of life, and city economy in a way that balances the through traffic needs with people who live and invest their lives in the city. So that's my grandstanding. Sorry, guys.
Josh, I wanted just to touch base with you again to make sure that you got some answers that you were looking for.
Yes, I appreciate the ask that I stay for the rest of this conversation, because I mean, where it doesn't help to see that the same is happening everywhere, I'm glad I'm not alone in this fight that I feel. I've lived at my home for 7 years now, and this is my first push to try to get something done in front of my area. And it's nice to see that it's not just my area that people are having this problem with. It's all through the city, and I'm glad I'm not alone. Even though the issue does seem to be ongoing, I'm glad I'm not alone in the issue, and I'm glad there is people to help and listen. And I feel the frustration as far as the Quarry Hill project and the amount of money that is going toward it. And I've been listening all night to the project and everything that's going into it. And I'm astounded at it, actually, and hearing about it. I've been seeing it, but I've never known what was coming of that, and to see what is coming of it and how much it's costing and how much it's taking out of the budget that could be fixing the crosswalks, the roads, the speed problems, the safety, the city quality of life that is going on in every road. It's shocking that this is what was decided before most of you, because I did hear that this came through the line before most of you, and that most of you are not as in support of it as it seems it was in support of at one point. But I've taken a lot from this, and you guys have definitely reassured me that you have listened to me tonight, and I appreciate that. And to my fellow residents of the city, I hope that you felt the same, because know that even if all your words weren't heard by everybody here, I heard you also as another fellow resident of the city. and the concern that you have for your own road.
Hey, Josh.
Can I say something just in closing?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was gonna.
This is Dale Bernash again from King Street, and I guess my question for you, and in closing, and I really appreciate you listening to us and hearing our concerns, and yeah, we're like one little street out of many, like Josh there too. So as citizens of Berry City, taxpayers, I love this city. What can we do to be proactive with all of this? I'm our neighborhood watch person, and should I be, contacting the other neighborhood people in the city? What can we do as citizens here? You see here from Perry Street, we have the gamut from one end to the other and in between. So what can we do as citizens to help you too with this issue and other issues of the city?
So I think one of the first and most important things is by exercising your voice, that actually helps me to allocate my focus. On any given day, I dealt with one water issue, 2 sewer issues, and then to come here and listen to folks talk about their need for safety, the effects of, and ultimately, it's other people's carelessness that creates those risks. And these are all avoidable, but that avoidance isn't our decision. We have to create that behavior in others. So bringing it up, making it important helps me because it brings my focus back to where will I take this issue? Some of the points that were made here tonight that I think are resounding. These are not singular situational issues. They're happening across the city. And as we make an improvement, while we welcome the improvement, we dread the result. And so there has to be some form of structural change that becomes the norm for Berry City. And for 2 years, we've talked about creating visual cadence on streets. So the classic thing is if you run by a picket fence, you feel like you're going 100 because the pickets are going by. Building those things into our city everywhere are really important. And so kind of the second piece to this, you've asked what you can do. So you've done something tremendously important by coming and talking about it. And this is the right place to do that because the Transportation Advisory Committee is a key input parameter for me as I'm trying to plan and respond to things. And so when I get data back on speed, if one of the things that I learned is 10 miles an hour over at the 85th percentile isn't the right number. Okay, that might be the norm, but that's kind of the national norm. And that's a norm for highways. Maybe there's a different value we should be using for residential streets. Maybe that number becomes 75%. And we say, okay, 75% is where we kick in a structural change. And I heard a comment about intentionally increasing the density of crosswalks. That actually contributes to visual cadence. When you drive over something, you see it go into the car. Those are all, this kind of discussion is really important. And having spent your time here tonight to talk about that has been really helpful to me. The third piece to this is really something that comes back to the city and its residents in terms of how we plan and do things. So when we talk about visual cadence, the addition of roadside objects, and again, something that's attractive, it can be trees or bushes, that helps remind folks they're moving is a useful, but there are many other things we can do. There are programs where you paint lines of different length and width on the road. The state did some testing of these triangular objects that decreased in width because it made people feel like as you drive over it, you see stuff going by faster and it makes you feel like you're accelerating. We tried them as a traffic calming measure for villages on state highways. We can look at deploying those things here in Berry City. So there's activism, and then there's some actions, and there's a planning component to this where we have to build something so that even though these come up one at a time, they're the same issue coming up over and over.
Excuse me, I just wanted to. Oh, John. Yes. I didn't allow you didn't answer my question, if there's any plans to mitigate the speed component from Washington onto Ferry Street and fell off track.
So I had said earlier that the police department will deploy the traffic card and we will get speed data. And I'm trying to make that one of the standards of practice that I use so that I can address each set of residents' concerns in a fair and consistent manner. And so when I have information to respond to, it's not that I doubt your sincerity or the importance of the issue. It's that when I have something that's objective, that I can say, this is the standard we'll use, and everyone will be treated with the same standard. It demonstrates a level of fairness that I feel bound to do.
Okay, so there is no current plans other than the speed cards.
But that,
Officially, yes. I would tell you unofficially, as soon as we started paving these questions came up for me and my staff, both on Camp Street and on Perry Street. And some of the questions we've internally started asking ourselves is, where and how many? And so we did the same thing for Air Street. The TAC got to look at a possibility of 3 different locations for placing that speed table on Air Street. We chose one because it fit some rules that included having a traffic light with it. And so we see these opportunities to do something that's helpful, and then we have to fit them into the sets of rules. If I don't have a street light, does that mean I can't do it? No, but it means I have to have a street light above my traffic speed control device, because that's what the MUTCD says. They have to be illuminated. So all those things come into play.
right, so it will be tracking coming off of Washington? If that's the way that it'll face, or is it, they're gonna be facing?
So each time that we have looked at any of our speed enforcement measures, both DPW and the PD have come together to say, right, where do we place the restrictions so that we have a good enforcement opportunity? I can tell you that every single one of the speed enforcement zones, we have laid out locations for the PD to be comfortably positioned to enforce and be in a location where they are not patently obvious. So they will be slightly out of line of sight, at a good angle to measure speed and be able to respond. On Maple Avenue, we made sure we positioned the sign so that the lower entrance to the Hope Cemetery is shielded by some trees. That sign is physically about 100 feet before they come into view of a radar gun. And so with cooperation between DPW and the police, we lay each of these out to make an enforcement option effective and to make sure that the signage that we put out provides fair warning to a driver who is trying to pay attention and follow the law. People are forewarned. If they're paying attention, they're not going to get in trouble, but if they're not paying attention, they're that careless driver. We want, from the DPW side, we want to make sure the PD has
every opportunity to capture that stop light. So we've looked at that. Both King and Queen Streets represent potential enforcement locations. And so when we look at Perry, King is better actually for the traffic that's coming from Hill, and Queen is actually better for the traffic that comes over the hill. Will they look in both directions? Typically, they set up in one direction, but they can look at either location. And so that type of dialogue is happening within the city. And I've worked extensively both with Chief Bombardier and Deputy Chief Eastman. Deputy Chief Eastman and I are planning to meet with the residents of Perry Street. We're trying to pick a date. He's on vacation next week. I can tell you the week after, it's looking like it's Wednesday. But we'll get that and we'll reach back out.
Oh, good.
Your name will want.
Thank you.
And just a touch base on what Dale had asked, when you already did the first steps, that was meeting with your neighbors, discussing what you need to do, and then come to us, and then, you know, you can go out and tell other neighborhoods, you know, meet, talk about what your issues are, and then, you know, bring it to us, you know, and then we'll accumulate those neighborhoods and those inputs, and then it'll just grow. And then if you want to go further, you can talk to your ward council member and speak to the city council, you know, it's a cumulative effect, and I think we're moving in the right direction.
Be vocal, yes.
Michael, did you have your hand up?
I did have my hand up, and I put it back down because I was trying to figure out how to be productive. Speeding is everywhere. We don't need to measure it everywhere. The idea, I mean, I feel like we have this, we're stuck in this like scientific mode when like we know what the problem is. And I understand if we have limited resources, we have to decide where to marshal them, et cetera, but this is not good enough. I don't think that we have to say, we got to check to see if you're right about the cars going down your street too fast. So my request to you, Bill, is to please unblock this part of the process to the extent to which you can, because there's no reason for any place to wait for an intervention that is going to slow down the cars. The only reason that I could see to not have some kind of intervention is if it's someplace where we want there to be some kind of, you know, like where we have prioritized the free flowing of cars. So let's not put a road bump, a speed bump on, you know, Washington Street, say, you know, yeah, maybe not. But I don't see what we get out of you know, like measuring every case. When people come and they say cars are going too fast on our street, it's because they are. And like, there's no chance, there's absolutely zero chance that it is not happening on a street where people say it's happening. And so like, I understand that you're saying we got to be fair. It wouldn't be fair if everyone who came in got what they wanted, because then it would just be a squeaky wheel getting the grease kind of scenario. But the thing is, everywhere needs it. So why would we put it behind a test? So to me, maybe we don't say, yeah, somebody comes to the TAC, they're going to get the intervention. But to say we're going to put it behind a measurement, which doesn't work very well, and also is like, there's only one thing to measure with, this is a bad place to be bound up in terms of process. So what I'm saying is you've explained why this has to wait. And I say, let's fix that.
And just building on that, I think the 85th percentile test is, you know, definitely dubious. It allows speeders to set speed limits or determine which interventions are when the speed limit sets the speed limit. And if people are going in excess of that, there's a violation of the law. And I can say, you know, it's great when there's speed enforcement is in place, and I think it, you know, works when people see a police officer on the side of the road, but they can't be everywhere, and you know, it's rarely, and it's not that often that I see them pull somebody over, so that the driver feels a consequence. I think that Dale asked what can you do? And I think budgets are really it's a reflection of what a city prioritizes. So if you want to see change in the city, I think it comes down to showing up and talking to your city councilors and the city manager and the city directors and saying, this is what I want the budget. This is the problem I want to see the budget solve. And the budget has a long build up. And ultimately, goes to you before you as voters as a total sum, but making sure those line items are there to say, so that when you ask, how does the city budget solve my problem, that your Ward 1 city councilors can say, this is how it solves that problem. And we have an extra $870 some thousand dollars in ARPA funds, which is the American Recovery Act, that we're going to be trying to decide how to spend for long-term investments. And so I think that could be a discussion point with those funds to reach out to the other city councilors. I know Councilor Stockwell is really concerned about this issue. I know Councilor Reel's really concerned about this issue. I know Councilor Wazazak's really concerned about this issue. I'm concerned about it. Councilor Shambell is. I think there's a majority on council that are looking for solutions, and we're looking for solutions from experts to make systems change and solve the speeding problem in the city.
Go ahead, Bonnie.
I'm Bonnie Miller. I live on the corner of Hill and Perry. And the tractor trailer thing is, if they come up Perry Street from Washington, are they gonna be able to get through that intersection? Because that's how most of them come,
Yes,
from
right, that's right.
Washington to Hill.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just for trucks.
So from Washington to Hill, they can negotiate that when there will be no one in the opposite lane, because it will require the opposite lane in order to make that right-hand turn. So
There isn't, oh, okay. So they can go down?
they can go down the hill by actually bringing the tractor across the opposite lane, so there will have to be no traffic there, and then taking a sharp right turn. And under that circumstance, the trailing wheels under the trailer will very likely come slightly up over the curb. So it's possible to negotiate that. One of the things that I offer folks is, as we look at problems, we can rarely find a solution that's definitive. I can't stop everything. But if my target is to make everything so that it's equal, if there's no benefit to taking a shortcut because it isn't shorter, people stop doing that. And so where I've looked particularly is, where does traffic kind of short circuit the systems we have? The traffic lights downtown are an example, where people go around them, and if they're able to go quickly and get through before they could have gotten through the light, they keep doing that. If I can slow them down enough so that there's no advantage to doing that, their interest in doing that goes away. And so
I'm wondering if the GPS that they're sending them through there too.
unfortunately, that is the bane of every rural community. That GPS says you can get there from here. And I'm sure the state would love to publish something about Smuggler's Notch, because it's a classic example.
The other thing I just want to say about crosswalks, and I'm sure it happens everywhere, people think they're safe when they're in them, and they're not. Mo and I walk every day, and we go through crosswalks. And then they look at you like, what are you doing there? You're supposed to, So I just want to say that you're not safe in a crosswalk because it's a crosswalk. That's how it is.
And I know you're right. I don't have a fix for that. I think, and there are some techniques that help that, and they were mentioned earlier. So making the crossing distance shorter, making the bulb out bringing the pedestrian sign out from behind the sidewalk to in front of the sidewalk into the street are all things that help make a driver more aware. But we're trying to persuade someone to pay attention to something we all believe they should be giving their fullest possible attention. We're trying to motivate others to be responsible.
And we need more police in those areas because I don't see any police around the crosswalks. Maybe if they got tickets once in a while, might help.
So I actually will ask, Deputy Chief Eastman has been publishing a bi-weekly summary. And so I can tell you that on average, they've made, I believe it's in the vicinity of 90 stops every week in their traffic enforcement, and they're issuing citations in double digits. They're actually, in the course of doing this, finding other criminal activity. So this enforcement effort has real benefit. But what you've just explained to me is that people aren't hearing about that. And so I see those because I'm sitting there looking at the speed enforcement effort. We're trying to make it as effective as we can. So I know it's accomplishing something. We need to publish that more so that people see there is something good happening. Not that there couldn't be more or we wouldn't like more, but see that something is happening.
I just want to thank everybody for listening to us tonight.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate your time.
I got one thing to finalize up is, when you guys talk about the police are gonna sit like on King and Queen Street, this is Mo talking. They did a sting over on Orange Street about 5-6 years ago. They had the sheriff department and the police department involved, and they sat, like Bill said, at the end of the street on the dead end side and watched the kids come up out of school, when they got out of school, before they put the stop signs there. That used to be a drag strip, because I did that area for 18 years, so I always took my break there so I could sit there and watch. After the stop signs that Bill said, they put up a stop sign, doesn't mean that people are gonna abide by it. Everybody either rolls through it, or they just forget about it and run through it because they look, nobody's coming off Trail Avenue, they just fly through it. But they did a sting one day with the sheriff's department, and I was there for 10 minutes taking my break. They stopped 22 cars. Don't know if they all got tickets, but when they enforce it, it gets out there. The next day or the next 2 weeks, when the kids came out of school, nobody went over the speed limit. Because as soon as one kid got caught on the cell phone on texting, hey, stay off Orange Street, they're doing this thing, bang. But they must have made some money that day, but it does work, Bill. But the thing is, maybe they need to get somebody else involved in place, just the Berry City Police. But they did use the sheriff's department on that occasion. So things do work.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Joanne's hand is up.
Did I miss a hand?
Oh, somebody has a hand up?
Go ahead,
Right.
Joanne.
I only have my hand up because I was going to say that I'm going to need to leave. It's late. And I would like to move to the round table. And what I'd like us to do at our next meeting is I'd like us to have a very thorough discussion about traffic calming in the city of Barry and how we're going to approach it. Because I think we need to develop a plan. And I think in addition to that plan, we need to develop a communication plan to the people who live in the city of Barry, reminding everyone that we have a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit and that we're going to be doing many things in the coming years to address that. And I think we just need to do it. We need to adopt the Nike slogan and just do it and stop talking about it. And thank you everyone for coming this evening. I hear you. I live on Hill Street. I feel your pain. I walk these streets every day myself, and I really, really appreciate you taking your time. Go to your city councilors, make everybody know how you feel, please.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Joanne. I think I'm gonna change that though and make it just enforce it. Okay, how's that?
That sounds great, Giuliano. I love it.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, everyone.
So I have a copy of this.
All right, so we will move on to 6.4.
I have
that Bill brought up.
Maybe we should table that one.
Well, let's hear what Bill has to say first, and then we can decide.
No, I was just kidding.
So this isn't something that requires a committee action. I wanted to advise folks that I engage in a large number of what are constructive discussions. And one of the things that I kind of come to the conclusion is that process-wise, I need to make sure I include the committee chair. And so I wanted to advise folks that I'll be doing that. And one of the things I'll be trying to make sure is that as these become really meaningful discussions, that I bring parts of them or all of them before the committee, because there's a lot of value in these individual discussions that I don't want to lose. And so I'm just going to be including the committee chair actively in much of my correspondence on anything that will affect this committee. I also work with the Paths, Routes and Trails, with the Civic Center Committee, our Safety Committee, and basically so that I don't lose things. And I'm busy enough that I lose some topics where I've had very constructive dialogue. I need to make sure that I get them into the hands of others who can help steer the ship in the right direction. And basically I had just wanted to bring that to the committee so that no one was surprised, and understand that it's, I think, just good practice to try to keep the committee informed.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, huge appreciation, Bill. And just, I have to say, with all those committees that you attend and all the work that you do and all the projects you manage, I don't fully understand how you keep on top of all the stuff that you do. And I'm sure you, and I know it's such a tough job, and want to say that I appreciate the work that you do. And also I'm curious if there are organizational improvements, would it be helpful to have a combination of the Paths, Routes and Trails Committee or Transportation Advisory Committee, or if things that can help make the city more efficient? I'm open ears to that. And I know also the Public Works Garage is in a sorry condition in terms of its, just its structural effectiveness. And it may be another good thing for this committee to do is to get a tour of that as conversations continue, and how important that facility is for the whole system. So.
I had a brief question. What was this agenda item, the 641 that was added? Just for minutes.
What I had as
Oh, sorry, that one cut out. Try it.
TAC communications. And we could clarify that to say with city staff. I just want to make sure that I get that staff comment back to everyone. Thank you.
Yes, anything else on that item? All right, we'll move on to other business, and I hope that no one else has other business. Perfect, thank you. Agenda item 8, the next meeting date is scheduled for August 18th, in person or over Zoom. Item 9, roundtable. Let's start with Jake. Anything?
Yeah, no, the only thing I'd add is just, it'd be nice to have a little bit more detail in the agendas to understand what we're talking about, where it is, what's being asked of the committee, just so we can arrive, and any background material, so we can arrive prepared and ready to have a fast and fair meeting.
Joanne mentioned that as well. I think strictly as the agenda goes on paper, I think that's basically what it's going to be. There won't be any explanation to it. I mean, I really haven't seen an agenda that kind of goes into that detail. But what Bill and I are working on is to create sort of a packet that you'll either get by mail or email, which will have maps if necessary and any background information. So with including the agenda and minutes. I know that people are having issues with minutes, so we'll kind of just feed that all to the committee members.
And when it comes to that communication thing, I think having that transparency with the public, that packet's publicly available, and it's really clear to the public when they read an agenda, what's on the table. That's how you build that communication and trust with the people these projects affect.
I can try, but I'm looking back to like the council agendas, and I don't see even that. They're just list of items, and anything else is kind of, you've got to dig further and go into, the city website and figure that out. It's just an outline of what we're going to be discussing. Basically, that's what the agenda is.
We'll look at building a set of support materials for the chairman to send out with the agenda. And I think it can be posted on the city website, but it would require folks to look at the TAC meeting agenda. We can put the support packet there. I asked Eli to attend, and we've added him to all of the monthly meetings. We'll follow up. Eli and I will try to meet with the chair before the meeting, a week before, and actually try to build out a packet that helps folks get background on the issues that we're going to discuss and put forward any useful materials you need to make the discussions be more productive. So, the request has been understood. The chair is very willing to do it. I need to mount staff support to do that for the TAC.
Thank you. That sounds great.
Michael?
Yes. Next month will be 12 months after we had officer elections, and so we should have new officer elections next month.
Okay, I'll add that. Art?
No, I have nothing.
I'd like to thank everyone for attending and staying up till almost 9:30. With that, I would entertain an adjournment.
Hey, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 9:21. Thank you, everyone.
Well, good night.
Before we go, I'm gonna need the recording for this one because there's some stuff I'm gonna have to go back and because I tried to get as much as I could, but there's some places that are sketchy. So, are you able to get that, Giuliano? Or
Honestly, I have no idea. Once
Okay.
this thing, the best person to contact would be Rick Tapp.
Rick? All right, yeah, I'll follow. Oh, yeah.
I'll ask Rick to get that to you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And folks.
Bill, I think we might need to end the meeting on that.
Yep, that was exactly why I came over here, so I could